Senator Schumer and his colleagues have said, no, we will shut government down unless you agree automatically to extend these subsidies, which were passed during the pandemic, after the pandemic is over, permanently. And that's just some of my colleagues' demands. I mean, you need an Excel spreadsheet to be able to follow their demands. Their demands to keep government open, you stack them here, you could stand on them and paint the ceiling. And that's not much of an exaggeration. And when Senator Schumer announced these demands, that's when I knew. I knew it in a nanosecond. We're going to have a shutdown. Because my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, are very smart people. And Senator Schumer is a smart person. And he knew when he announced these demands that I could tell he wasn't serious. He knew they were unserious. And he knew that neither the president nor the other members of Congress were going to accept them. And you know what? Many Democrats know they're unreasonable as well. So that's why I say the policy part of this makes absolutely no sense. And that's because this isn't about policy. This shutdown is about politics.
This may look like another routine budget standoff, but it's actually a stress test for how much political pressure America's governing system can absorb before it breaks. What's really being tested here is whether public institutions still exist to serve citizens, or whether they've become tools for leverage inside party power struggles. This raises broader questions about how fiscal authority, democratic accountability, and political brinkmanship collide inside Congress. In this video, we'll break down how a funding deadline turned into a high-stakes battle over who controls the rules of government itself.
Well, Mr. President, it looks like we're going to have a shutdown. What does that tell us? I'll tell you what it tells me. It's simply that much more evidence that human evolution is a slow process. I thought humans had advanced more as a species, but apparently we haven't. What do I mean by a shutdown? Well, we can't keep government open without a budget. And tonight at midnight, our current budget expires unless we vote to maintain the status quo and continue the current budget as we negotiate a new one. Many of my Democratic friends say, well, what's the problem? The Republicans are in charge. The president's a Republican, and the Republicans have a majority in the Senate, and the Republicans have a majority in the House. What's the problem? They know what the problem is. We can't pass a budget. We can't keep government open just with Republican votes here in the Senate. We only have 53 Republicans. We need 7 Democrats to join with us. So for my Democratic colleagues to say, well, the Republicans are in charge and they don't need us, they know that's not accurate. And that's what's going on. Now, we've had a few shutdowns before, and every shutdown is different, but most shutdowns are a combination of both policy and politics in varying degrees. This shutdown, in terms of policy, makes absolutely no sense. None. What we have proposed to our Democratic colleagues and the minority leader, Senator Schumer, is to make no changes to the current budget. We just want to continue the current budget and keep government open until just before Thanksgiving to give us more time to negotiate a permanent budget. We did that many times when President Biden was president and when the Democrats had the majority. In fact, we did it 13 times. Not only have Republicans done it, but Democrats have routinely done it. But this time, the Democrats have said, no. We want more. And you may be thinking, okay, that's reasonable. What do you want? Well, it's not reasonable. In effect, what the Democrats are saying to us is that we're going to close government unless you Republicans agree to make it bigger. We don't want the status quo. We want you to commit to spending $1.5 trillion, more than you're spending now. And we, the Democrats are saying, are going to tell you how to spend it. First, they want us to repeal all of the Medicaid reforms that we did in the reconciliation bill. Some call it the One Big Beautiful Bill. The One Big Beautiful Bill would not reduce Medicaid. In fact, it would go up about 2% every year as a result of our bill. But it would say to people who are on Medicaid, who aren't eligible for Medicaid, that you're not going to get Medicaid anymore. Dual eligibles, people who sign up in Louisiana and Mississippi, that's fraud. Under our bill, they would be thrown off. The Democrats want to put back on. Under our changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill that the Democrats want us to reverse, you would have to satisfy certain income levels to be on Medicaid. The law says if you make too much money, you can't get Medicaid because Medicaid is for the poor. In my state, we have found people through audits making $120,000 a year on Medicaid. So our bill, which the Democrats want us to repeal after just passing it, would say to those people that if you don't meet the income limits, you can't get Medicaid. So that's the first demand of the Democrats. Take out all the reforms that we made to Medicaid in the reconciliation bill and throw them out the window. Number two, they want to extend the Obamacare subsidies. What does that mean? Well, first let me say Obamacare was a mistake, and we know that now. When President Obama passed Obamacare, we were told that our lives would be better. Our lives have been worse. We were told that it would make health insurance more accessible and more affordable. It's done neither. On the non-Medicaid part of Obamacare, we've got, 25 million Americans who are accessing it. And for the most part, about 90% of them are low-income Americans. But the rest are making huge sums of money. Some are making $160,000 a year getting Obamacare subsidized by taxpayers. And that's not the way it was supposed to be. How did we get here? Well, it's simple. During the pandemic, when people were being laid off or losing their jobs or couldn't work, President Biden ran through a bill to enlarge the subsidies. He took the cap off the amount that you needed to earn in order to get Obamacare. And those subsidies at the end of this year are about to run out. Now, the Republicans have said, we'll sit down with our Democratic friends and talk about how to extend them, but we want to reform the program because it's not right that people making $125,000, $150,000, $250,000, $200,000 a year are getting their health insurance subsidized by the federal government. That's bone deep down to the mayor stupid. But the Democrats, Senator Schumer and his colleagues, have said, nope, we will shut government down unless you agree automatically to extend these subsidies, which were passed during the pandemic, after the pandemic is over, permanently. And that's just some of my colleagues' demands. I mean, you need an Excel spreadsheet to be able to follow their demands. Their demands to keep government open, you stack them here, you could stand on them and paint the ceiling. And that's not much of an exaggeration. And when Senator Schumer announced these demands, that's when I knew. I knew it in a nanosecond. We're going to have a shutdown. Because my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, are very smart people. And Senator Schumer is a smart person. And he knew when he announced these demands that I could tell he wasn't serious. He knew they were unserious. And he knew that neither the president nor the other members of Congress were going to accept them. And you know what? Many Democrats know they're unreasonable as well. So that's why I say the policy part of this makes absolutely no sense. And that's because this isn't about policy. This shutdown is about politics. Now, parties change, just like the human experience changes over time. Political parties change. My party's changing. So is the Democratic Party. And there is a wing of the Democratic Party, I call it the socialist wing. Some less charitable people call it the loon wing of the Democratic Party. And they are in charge right now. And the non-loon, non-socialist Democrats are scared to death of them. And this particular wing of the Democratic Party that's in the ascendancy, what do they believe? They try to out-weird each other all the time. They hate, if you listen to them, they hate Thomas Jefferson. They hate Abraham Lincoln. They hate George Washington. They hate Dr. Seuss. They hate Mr. Potato Head. They think our kids should be able to change genders back and forth at recess. Kids. And if it's their preference, should be able to undergo sex change operations while minors paid by you, the taxpayers. They believe that. They believe in open borders. They believe that if you support the law, which says you have to be vetted to come into our country, if you support the law, you're a racist. I think if you support the law, you're being prudent. But they believe in open borders. And my Democratic friends are about to elect a new mayor in New York City who is a member of the Loon Wing. He's a self-avowed socialist. He has said if the Prime Minister of Israel comes to New York City, he will have him arrested. But this is not the majority of Democrats that believe this. I don't think that for a second. And I know many of my Democratic colleagues here don't believe that. But the Loon Wing, the socialist wing, the angry Gary Busey wing of the Democratic Party is in ascendancy. And they've got a lot of power, enormous amount of power. And many of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate are scared of them. And the Loon Wing is mad at many of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate. They shouldn't be, but they are. And therefore, many of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate are scared of the Loon Wing. And they want the Loon Wing to love them. The Loon Wing will never love them. They're better off doing the right thing, and they know what the right thing to do is. But that's why I say this is a political decision, and that's why we're going to shut government down. Now, once you shut government down, unless you're prepared to leave it shut down permanently, and maybe my Democratic colleagues are, but I don't think so. I still, maybe I'm naive, but I still think too many of my Democratic colleagues in the Senate know better. Once you shut the government down, you got to get it back open. How are they going to get it back open? We're not going to agree to their demands. $1.5 trillion. They know we're not going to agree to it. So how is my friend Senator Schumer going to get government back open? You know, there's a famous movie line. I don't remember the movie. I think Denzel Washington said the line. I love Denzel Washington. He's what cool looks like. The guy's awesome. He's a total baller, man. I love Denzel Washington. But anyway, I think he said in one movie, if you pray for rain, you better be prepared to deal with the mud. And truer words were never spoken. So if you want to shut down, I say to my Democratic friends, you better be prepared to deal with the mud. How are you going to get it back open? How are you going to get it back open? I wouldn't want to be in their shoes to have to make that decision. Let me just say a few words. Every time we do a shutdown, it scares the living daylights out of the American people, especially our elderly. It breaks my heart. All of us get phone calls from folks scared to death. They're not going to get their Social Security check, or they're not going to be able to see their doctor, and it just breaks my heart. So I want to give them a little bit of assurance. During the shutdown, the executive branch will be in charge, and the Trump administration is not going to do anything to hurt our elderly. I want to assure them of that. If you're receiving a Social Security check or Medicare or Medicaid or a veteran's disability, your checks are going to continue. We will make sure of that. Trump administration will make sure of that. Government may be shut down, but essential workers will still be there to make sure those checks are sent out. If you're hungry and you don't have the money to eat, we're not going to let you starve to death. The administration is going to continue payments. Some people call it SNAP. I call it food stamps. And we will continue the payments for the women, infants, and children's program. Most of us refer that to WIC. You'll still get your mail. Don't worry about that. Postal Service will be working through the shutdown. If you depend for health care on your Veterans Administration and VA medical centers, they're going to remain open. So I don't want you to be scared about that. Now, you're going to notice an impact. Probably we've got 2.5 million federal employees. Probably 750,000 aren't going to be on the job. Under the law, they have to go home. So you will notice an impact. You'll notice it in our parks. You'll notice it in our museums here in Washington. If you're visiting, you'll notice it in many of the federal agencies. That's law. They can't come to work in a shutdown. Doesn't matter who initiates the shutdown. We still got a little time. It's midnight tonight, and we're going to be taking some votes here in a few minutes. Give our Democratic colleagues one last chance to do the right thing, and I certainly hope they accept it. With that, Mr. President, appreciate your patience, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alster-Brooks.
The moment Senator John Kennedy delivered his warning that if you pray for rain, you had better be ready to deal with the mud, was not a throwaway line, not a joke, not a folksy flourish meant to lighten the mood. It was a blunt forecast of what happens when political leaders choose spectacle over responsibility and leverage over stability. It came after he laid out in stark detail how a budget that could have simply been extended to keep the government running was instead being used as a pressure point in a high-stakes confrontation over trillions of dollars and the direction of federal policy. In that moment, the Senate chamber stopped sounding like a place of governance and started sounding like a storm warning. What Kennedy revealed in that exchange is something Americans have felt for years, but rarely hear spoken aloud inside the halls of power. A government shutdown is never really about whether there is enough money or whether there is a technical path forward. It is about who is willing to use the machinery of government as a bargaining chip. When he explained that Republicans could not keep the government open without 7 Democratic votes, he was exposing the quiet reality behind every major budget fight. No side ever truly governs alone, but both sides often pretend that they do. And when that illusion collapses, it is not lawmakers who feel the shock. It is the country. His description of the demands being placed on the budget process was not just a list of numbers and programs. It was a portrait of how policy can become untethered from accountability. Kennedy argued that what was being requested was not a continuation of current funding, not a temporary bridge, but a massive expansion of spending tied to programs that, in his view, had drifted far from their original purpose. Whether one agrees with his conclusions or not, the structure of the moment was unmistakable. One side was asking for a clean extension to avoid disruption. The other was demanding sweeping commitments before allowing the government to remain open. That is not negotiation. That is leverage. And leverage in Washington has a very specific meaning. It means using the threat of instability to extract concessions. It means holding ordinary life hostage to political ambition. When Kennedy said that the policy side of this made no sense and that this was really about politics, he was naming something that too often goes unspoken. The budget is not just a spreadsheet, it is the operating system of the country. When it fails, everything downstream begins to flicker. Parks close, offices shut, paychecks stall, uncertainty spreads. And yet, in that moment, it was being treated like a poker chip on a green felt table. The deeper truth beneath Kennedy's speech was not about one party or another. It was about a system that has learned to function on brinkmanship. He described how factions within a political party can gain enormous power by being willing to go further than anyone else, by being louder, by being more uncompromising, by being more willing to push institutions to the edge. That dynamic does not just distort policy, it distorts courage. Lawmakers who know better are pressured into silence. Leaders who understand the consequences are pushed into delay. And the center, where solutions are supposed to live, gets hollowed out. When Kennedy warned that those driving this confrontation would never truly be satisfied, he was describing a cycle that has repeated itself across administrations and eras. The more a faction demands, the more the rest of the system adapts to appease it, and the more extreme the next demand becomes. That is how governance turns into performance. That is how responsibility turns into fear. And that is how the country ends up staring down yet another midnight deadline, wondering why the same story keeps playing out. But perhaps the most striking part of Kennedy's remarks came when he spoke not about numbers or politics, but about the people who will feel the consequences. He talked about those who worry when the government shuts down, those who watch the news and wonder if the systems they depend on will still function tomorrow. He spoke about the anxiety that floods in when stability becomes uncertain. That is the human cost of brinkmanship. It is invisible on the Senate floor, but it is real in living rooms across the country. In that moment, he also made something else clear. Even in a shutdown, there are people who keep showing up. There are systems that keep running. There are workers who keep doing their jobs so that the most essential parts of American life do not grind to a halt. That is the quiet heroism of government that rarely makes headlines. And it stands in sharp contrast to the political theater that so often surrounds it. When Kennedy said that once you shut government down, you have to find a way to bring it back, he was speaking a truth that cuts through all ideology. Chaos is easy to start. Stability is harder to rebuild. The people who light the fuse are rarely the ones who have to clean up the aftermath. That work falls to negotiators, administrators, and citizens who are left picking up the pieces of a system that was treated like a weapon instead of a responsibility. What this moment exposes is not just a budget fight, but a moral question. Do those entrusted with power see government as a tool to serve the public or as a stage on which to perform? Do they view compromise as weakness or as the necessary price of governing a diverse and complicated nation? And do they understand that every deadline they play with, every shutdown they flirt with, ripples outward into millions of lives that never asked to be part of the drama? The rain that Kennedy spoke of is not just a metaphor. It is the cascade of consequences that follows when leaders choose escalation over resolution. And the mud is what everyone else has to walk through when the storm finally hits. This hearing was not just about budgets or deadlines. It was about what kind of political culture we are willing to tolerate. It was about whether the American system is still capable of prioritizing continuity over conflict and service over spectacle. The answers to those questions do not live in speeches alone. They live in what happens when the votes are cast, when the clock strikes midnight, and when the country wakes up to see what kind of government it has been given. If you want to understand power in America, do not just watch what is promised, watch what is risked. And if you want to protect the integrity of that system, do not look away when it is put on the line. This is why Liberty Report USA exists. To cut through the noise, to expose the stakes, and to hold those in power accountable when the future of the country is treated like a bargaining chip. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA and support our work to expose the truth.